The past was waiting when the soldier closed her eyes. Flash. A blink of white just above the trench. Then the blast wave. Sound so loud it became silent. The world turning over and over, blurring. Shivering in orange and red before she hit the trench wall. A long, sliding second. Ears ringing.
Medicaid! Medicaid!
Shouting, the buzz zip of rounds and las bolts. Another flash in the air. Red, orange, smoke billowing up to smother the dying sun. The air shivering, and the ground rolling like an ocean as the shockwave ripped through it. Red mud bubbling up between the seams in the trench plating as the blood-soaked earth liquefied. And the shouting went on, louder than the roar as another blast wave spilled over the trench lip. She could not feel her las gun in her hands. She needed her gun. Needed to get up. Needed to stand. Medicaid! There was a hand in front of her. It was red. Medicaid! Medic. Why could she hear that voice? Then she realized that the red hand in front of her eyes was hers.
Closing on drop zone, 2 minutes.
The pilot's voice cut the memory away. She opened her eyes. The amber light of the gunship's crew compartment replaced the remembered blood. The gunship was shaking. She could feel the engines fighting gravity as it cut down through Atoma's thickening atmosphere. Pleasant dreams? The witch smiled at her from across the compartment. The psyker's pupils, ragged bullet holes and yellow irises.
We have visual on the drop zone. Stand by for decompression,
came the pilot's voice over the cabin vox. The soldier fastened her rebreather mask, hands moving slowly over the buckles and catches. 2 of the others were doing the same, the priest fumbling with the catches. The psyker's thin fingers moving like spider legs as they settled the mask over their mouth. Only the Ogren didn't bother. What, you just going to hold your breath then? Asked the witch. The Ogren nodded. The psyker shook his head. Amateurs. A miracle if we even survive 5 seconds. The witch looked at the soldier again. Cadian, right? There was a mockery dancing in his eyes.
Depressurize in 3, 2, 1,
said the pilot. The light of the compartment blinked red. Red. Her hands were red. She did not have her gun.
Acadian without a gun is a traitor to their training,
shouted the remembered voice of her sergeant in the back of her skull. She had been 10, one of hundreds standing in the drill grounds while ice wind spiraled snow from the gray sky.
Acadian is a soldier, and a soldier is their weapon.
First lessons, first truths, learned long ago. But she could not see her weapon, just the wet red of her fingers, and the strobing blink of explosions above the trench lip.
Medic!
She tried to shout, but the words came out as a gurgle of pink froth. This was it. No rifle. No strength to stand. Pathetic. Loathsome. Weak. Not Acadian. Acadia had died fighting. A whole world with its death grip still on the trigger, and she? She had survived that only to die without a weapon. Calling for a medic that wouldn't come. She had been born on a world that existed for war. Another daughter in generations of billions who stood on the edge of hell and said to its hordes, "Come no further." People talked about the Emperor's angels, the space marines who brought death like divine lightning, about how they were humanity's shield, They were real, and terrible, and beyond human. But for all their strength, they could not shield mankind. Mankind had to be its own shield. Armies of flesh and blood, and iron and fire. Armies that could shake the world with their tread and the voices of their guns. Armies that failed in their purpose only because of weakness. The weakness of a last soldier bleeding out in a trench without even a gun in her hand. Bits of body armor lay in the red mud around her. A blink before, there had been a platoon in that space, orders snapping the air, gear harnesses clinking, message runners trying to force through the press. Now everything was unmoving beneath a churning sky. Unmoving and torn and glossed in crimson. She felt something tap at her shoulder, slow, insistent. She forced her gaze up. A hand hung from the rung of a trench ladder above her. She could see the numerals tattooed in the digits and the prayer bead still twined in its grip. Blood was dripping from the curled finger to tap on her head. She saw the enemy then. They were on the lip of the trench above, ragged shapes in mismatched armor, dark and barbed, faces hidden by curtains of chainmail, and finger bones tied to gun stocks. They moved quiet, carefully, ghosting down into the trench. She could see markings of Imperial units under the 8 pointed stars scratched and burned into their armor. Weakness. In the end, that was the real enemy. Weakness that let a soldier think that they had a purpose other than to fight and die. Weakness that let treachery become betrayal. Weakness that kept her down in the red mud. One of the enemy troopers was just 2 steps away from her. She could see the rust pocks on the shin plate of his armor. Strange. The rust was almost a pattern. The trooper took another step. It had a flamer. Drops of burning green liquid drooled from the weapon's muzzle. The weapon and the enemy's gaze turned towards her. She came off the ground. She did not try to hit the enemy. She went for the flamer. The enemy squeezed the weapon's trigger. Liquid flame joshed down the trench. The rest of the enemy troops were shouting now. The trooper tried to rip the flamer free from her grip, but she held on, and she rammed the crown of her helmet into the enemy's face. Bone shattered behind the chainmail mask. She struck again. Now the enemy was falling, and she wrenched the flamer from their grip. The other 2 troopers were just 3 paces away, guns aimed, fingers pulling triggers. She looked at them for an instant. She saw the tight press of figures in rusted armor and tattered fatigues. Weakness. Despair. The false hope and the promises of a false god. She triggered the flamer, and the world became bright. The gunship's assault ramp opened, air hissed out, and sunlight poured in. The soldier heard the Ogren gulp a breath of air, and blue sky filled the widening gap. The gunship banked.
Enjoy the view,
Came the pilot's voice.
Emperor's blessed and most valued world of Atoma. You get to see the best of it before you meet its worst.
Fog lay in a golden shroud across the curve of the ground below. Huge, needle-hive structures rose from the murk. Each one was the size of a mountain.
That one just on the left as we come round. That's our girl.
The hive was suddenly there, close enough that she could see the broken pylons and exhaust chimneys dotting its flanks. Rust and corrosion glittered on its skin.
Lovely, isn't it?
Chuckled the pilot.
Grand and glorious and rotten in ways it don't even know.
The Valkyrie banked hard. The priest lurched and made a sound as if they were trying not to throw up. Their grip on the grab rail slipped, and the Ogryn's hand caught the priest's shoulder and yanked him back in from the open door. Blessings of the throne be on you, gasped the priest. The Ogryn nodded. The big man's face was reddening as he held his breath. The gunship slammed into a spiral dive, and the side of the hive loomed close. Then the soldier was down the assault ramp, running through the cloud of rust dust billowing up from the downdraft, gun in hand. Above, the light of the sun was clear in the blue sky. Ahead, the needle of the hive spire rose to stab the heavens. The gunship rose into the sky. The Ogryn drew a breath. The psyker shifted, and the priest straightened. The spire rose above them, a crooked finger of metal beckoning. A hatch once used to maintain the hive exterior sat open just a few paces away. Rust clumped its hinges, and for a second, the soldier thought she saw a pattern in the corrosion. 3 irregular dots, whirling and repeating across the metal. She blinked and could not see it anymore.
Doesn't look like much of a front line of a war zone, does it?
The psyker said.
This is the Imperium of Man, she said and shrugged. Everywhere is a front line.
And she moved forwards.